want to tell you a story of a world-class mineral discovery that was made in the Philippines, which has several interesting parallels to our Thor polymetallic project in southeast British Columbia. Just like Thor at its current stage of development, this obscure Filipino project started off with a handful of small mines that followed a linear trend of vein-type deposits near the surface. More in-depth exploration, later in the mine's history, yielded a mineral resource of almost incomprehensible size. I'll try not to speculate in much detail about the size of what we're hunting at Thor, but we've compiled our evidence and established a new and compelling model based on 14 years of exploration work. Looking at it now, our data suggests we're on the verge of a similar discovery. Today we're going to take a deep dive into the history and geology of the Lepanto and far southeast deposits of the Philippines. We believe that there is much to be learned from these two linked deposits, which applies to our continuing exploration at Thor. The end goal is to reward our shareholders with ownership of a district-scale mineral resource at a fraction of the time and expense typically required to outline mineral prospects of this magnitude. Come along as I share some of the insights we've developed about Thor, because if this turns out to be true, we're going to rock the entire mining exploration landscape in southeast BC. The legend of Yamashita's gold has gripped the Philippines for at least 50 years. Many Filipinos believe the legend is true. However, local authorities and scientific publications have tried to debunk it. They cite a lack of hard evidence and environmental damage from illegal treasure hunters searching for these legendary gold bars, which were supposedly hidden in abandoned mine tunnels by Japanese troops at the end of World War II. But maybe this legend, like many others, is partly correct, and the truth is a little more complicated than either side would want you to believe. Emperor Hirohito announced Japan's surrender via radio broadcast on August 15, 1945, bringing the Second World War to a close. But on the northern island of Luzon in the Philippines, Imperial Japan's last and most powerful warlord, General Tomoyuki Yamashita, decided not to give up the struggle. Yamashita, known to his enemies as the Tiger of Malaya, had been appointed as military governor-general of the Philippines. Yamashita was responsible for the protection of the critical resource-producing industries there, the lifeblood of Japan's war effort. Of many terrible battles following the Allied invasion of Luzon, one stands out in particular. On June 24, 1945, Yamashita's elite namesake unit, Tiger Division, began a desperate 27-day battle with the Allies to keep control of the Lepanto copper and gold mine in the Mankayan Mineral District. It was a hopeless battle for the Japanese, who fled deeper into the mountains to regroup and lick their wounds, still clinging to hope that they'd one day regain control of Lepanto, though this would never be. Interestingly, the last Japanese holdout in the Philippines wouldn't surrender until 1974, 29 years after the end of the war. Yamashita himself held out even after his emperor declared surrender, but he wasn't able to keep it going quite as long. The Tiger himself was delivered to the Allies by Filipino guerrillas on September 2, 1945. It seems that Filipino locals have latched onto an idea that some secret treasure explains Yamashita and the other Philippine holdouts' fanaticism. This probably gave rise to the enduring popularity of the Yamashita's gold legend. But the real-life discoveries of large gold deposits associated with mines operated by the Japanese during World War II has surely crystallized the legend's staying power. There really is gold hidden underneath old mines like Lepanto, as the legend claims. The only difference is that it's not found in literal gold bars. It's interesting to speculate about whether the Tiger of Malaya might have had a hunch that Lepanto was the avenue to spectacular riches. But Yamashita couldn't have known Lepanto was an offshoot of something much larger, could he? Or is it possible that 35 years before the discovery of the far southeast Porphyry, the signs were there that a world-class mining district was at stake? Personally, I think Yamashita's gold is an urban legend that takes inspiration from the real-world events surrounding Lepanto and the eventual discovery of the far southeast Porphyry. After all, the most compelling legends and myths are often built around a significant kernel of truth. And it was in 1980, only 6 years after the last Japanese holdout in the Philippines surrendered, that the real treasure, the real Yamashita's gold, was discovered. In this case, the truth about Lepanto is that it was the mining equivalent of an appetizer, with an impressive value today of about 17.6 billion US dollars. The main course, though, was the far southeast Porphyry. The Porphyry is the source of the Lepanto epithermal system and is connected to it deep within the earth. It turns out that this main course contains at least 25 times the tonnage of Lepanto, and today that's worth nearly $80 billion. Hi, I'm Thomas Gardner, Environmental, Social, and Governance Director for Tyrannus Resources, Inc. I've worked at the Thor mine and exploration project since we acquired the project in 2006. While researching known examples of linked epithermal and porphyry systems, I learned a lot about Lepanto and its history. I've made this video to discuss the two side by side because we've uncovered evidence that our 100% owned Thor deposit in southeastern British Columbia is a good analog to Lepanto. More importantly, a deeper porphyry system, as with far southeast, was probably Thor's source. If this is true, our existing 43101 resource estimate barely even scratched the surface of the mineralization at Thor, and there is much, much more waiting to be discovered deeper below the surface of Great Northern Mountain. As we were gearing up for the summer exploration season last year, in 2021, we had also resolved a new test for the Thor deposit. If it is indeed epithermal, then it probably conforms to the major faults which are the same age or older than the deposit. Mineralized zones should be observable all along such structures, becoming thinner as you get further away from the heat engine. Here we are looking at a cross-section of Lepanto and its source, and you can see that the epithermal zone continues along the entire length of the Lepanto fault zone, becoming thinner and thinner as you get more distal to the source. At Thor, we think the Thor fault zone, which is at least 4 kilometers long and running northwest to southeast, was the main conduit for epithermal fluids at the time of emplacement. Coincidentally, this fault lines up with the major porphyry belts and fault zones in British Columbia. The same linear correlation is also true of the Lepanto fault and the Philippine fault zone. The Philippine fault zone is also infested with porphyries, all of them running northwest to southeast. Looking at these two regions at a continental scale can shed some light on this geographical coincidence. We're looking at two subduction zones on either side of the Pacific Ocean. Both of them are trending northwest to southeast. Our new, more thoroughly defined and testable epithermal theory would mean that there should be additional mineralized zones hidden in the fault structure underneath Thor's Ridge. Positive identification of such zones would effectively confirm the theory that Thor is an epithermal deposit. So in 2021, we put the idea to the test. With the help of an expert diamond driller, we drilled 10 holes in Thor's Ridge through a massive landslide over 50 meters deep. The results were highly encouraging. Just as predicted, there was another mineralized epithermal zone underneath the landslide, following the logical sequence along the Thor fault zone. One hole hit 6.42% combined copper, lead, and zinc, 253.8 grams per ton silver, and a little over half a gram per ton gold, over 3.96 meters. These are some seriously impressive results. Adding new epithermal zones to the northwest will add significant tonnage at high grades to the 43101 resource. and the door is wide open for Tyrannus to continue following the trend established with the Thunder Zone. Around 1900, the original miners of Thor had followed the mineralization in the Thor Fault Zone as far northwest as Bluebell. They tried to continue following the veins to the northwest, but were confounded in making any further progress when they encountered the substantial landslides in the area. It seemed to them as though Bluebell was the end of the road. This effectively halted further additions to the known extent of the mineralization. But now that this roadblock has been removed, it's incumbent upon Tyrannus to follow the Thor Fault Zone northwest and continue to add tonnage to the epithermal portion of the deposit. More important than the grade and thickness of the new zone, however, was the confidence this new Thunder Zone discovery gives us in our ability to make predictions about the epithermal portion of the deposit and to speculate about its origins. Like Mendel's 19th century experiments with pea plants, which established genetics, we have tested a complex theory and found it to not only be correct in a single experiment, but repeatable. With a scientifically validated model in hand, we've now cracked Thor's complicated geological code wide open. So the question arises, what was the heat engine behind all of this epithermal activity at Thor? Could there be a far southeast to this Canadian Lepanto? First mined on a large scale by the Spanish in the mid-1800s, Lepanto is a moderately sized, high-grade vein system which rises to outcrop its surface. The same can be said of Thor. The similarities don't end there, though. In fact, both deposits are about 2.5 kilometers in strike length. Both deposits are epithermal and conform to a major northwest-southeast trending fault. Both deposits consist of lenticular, segmented quartz veins which contain banded sulfide ores, and both were formed in a high sulfidation environment. Both Thor and Lepanto sit atop active subduction zones, where the interaction of tectonic plates create bubbles of magma which escape from the Earth's mantle and rise towards the surface. These bands of magma bubbles are known as magmatic arcs, and the bubbles of magma are called volcanic intrusives, or porphyries. Heat from the magma chamber interacts with fluids in the Earth's crust, creating hydrothermal systems and hot springs. We should also take note that there are many currently active hot springs in the vicinity of Thor. Hot springs are also very active around Lepanto, perhaps unsurprisingly. Moreover, there is another mine right next door to Thor, the Max Molybdenum mine, which is known to be a porphyry system. This is located only 8 kilometers southwest of Thor. Similarly, it was the discovery of the Gwinnewang porphyry, southeast of Lepanto, which led to the discovery of far southeast. These observations are consistent with the significant magmatic arc system underlying the entire region, and accounts for the genesis of the very large hydrothermal systems at Thor. It was hydrothermal fluids which were responsible for the deposition of both Thor and Lepanto. You see, hydrothermal fluids are enriched with metals, and over hundreds of thousands of years, these metals are carried into voids within the surrounding rock and deposited there. Over time, the hydrothermal systems build up such a concentration of valuable metals that they become attractive sources of the valuable and base metals used in everyday life. While these similarities have been helpful in identifying the need to explore for an underlying porphyry, establishing new drill targets and exploration goals, there's one primary difference between Thor and Lepanto. The far southeast porphyry was so young when it was discovered that it hadn't even finished cooling yet. In contrast, the mineralization at Thor is much older, perhaps Cretaceous. Thus, disruptions to the generalized pattern of linked epithermal porphyry deposits are much more likely at Thor, as we have already seen in the case of the massive landslide between Bluebell and the Thunder Zone. Folding and faulting have also played their part in obscuring the overall picture at Thor, so the intricate geological maps Tyrannus has made since 2006 will be crucial to making future discoveries. One telltale sign of porphyry mineralization are the alteration halos which form around the magma chamber as it cools within the Earth's crust. The heat from a porphyry is so intense that it alters the country rock, even hundreds of meters from the porphyry body itself. Here we are looking at an idealized depiction of the alteration zones which surround a porphyry. These alteration zones seem to be universal to porphyry bodies, and sericite, or possibly phyllic alteration, was noted to be especially prevalent in association with the far southeast porphyry underneath Lepanto. In 2021, petrologists at the Colorado School of Mines examined some rock samples taken by Tyrannus from Broadview Creek, about 1 kilometer away from the epithermal trend at Thor. These dark green to gray rocks were noted to contain chlorite epidote carbonate mineralization. In other words, they were part of the propylitic alteration zone which surrounds a porphyry. In previous years, Tyrannus has drilled 2 deep exploratory holes at Thor, which have encountered hundreds of meters of lighter green sericite alteration. It seems we have come very close to discovering Thor's porphyry source in the past, each time barely missing the porphyry body at the center. As you can see, these holes skirted the edge of a major magnetic anomaly, modeled in red, the final and most compelling piece of evidence that Thor is an intact porphyry epithermal system. The last and most intriguing evidence of a porphyry source linked to the epithermal zones at Thor is a tremendous magnetic feature which occurs on the eastern flank of the epithermal mineralization located in the Thor fault zone. Many ground geophysical lines have consistently demonstrated that this feature is closely associated with the epithermal trend in the Thor fault zone. Drilling in this area has revealed mineralized dike material, likely to be an offshoot of the mineralized porphyry itself. Crucially, it appears as though the Broadview Formation, shown here in yellow, is still mostly intact throughout the area. Comprised of erosion-resistant sedimentary rocks, the Broadview Formation has acted as a sort of a ceiling to the porphyry below. It is very likely that the Broadview Formation has played a role in the formation of additional high-grade epithermal zones around the porphyry, and these are yet to be discovered. These are hypothesized to occur in this region, the eastern flank of the porphyry body. Miraculously, it appears that the Broadview Formation has protected the relatively old mineralization at Thor from erosion. This is a two-edged sword, however, as it makes exploration for the deeply concealed porphyry a much more difficult prospect without accurate geophysics. Most linked porphyry epithermal systems worldwide have been eroded to some degree, but that does not seem to be the case at Thor. Only more drilling at significant depth and accurately targeted will yield the answer. Hopefully this video has been a useful aid in understanding the ongoing exploration goals at our Thor project. We are very excited to get to work testing the magnetic anomaly with deeper drilling to determine if it is indeed a major porphyry ore body linked to the epithermal systems we've thus far become acquainted with. To find out, we will fly an airborne mobile MT, EM, and MAG survey this spring over the entire property area. The survey can penetrate to a depth of up to 1 kilometer and is highly sensitive in comparison to the ground survey data we've been working with thus far. Tyrannus has commissioned the survey because it helps us address the major issues with each of the pieces of evidence suggesting the existence of a mineralized porphyry system. The first is that the exploration challenges presented by the extensive age of the mineralization and subsequent deformations to the original linked porphyry epithermal system are more easily mapped this way. And secondly, the size and resolution of the magnetic anomaly identified on ground mag below the intact lithocaps will be significantly improved, so that drill holes can be targeted much more accurately. This will greatly increase our confidence that the drill holes are targeting the smaller mineralized areas within the alteration shells around the porphyry, and not missing them or attacking them from inefficient angles. With the airborne geophysical survey data in hand, Tyrannus will be positioned for extremely rapid resource growth as we target deeper mineralization that has been established to a high degree of confidence through our modeling. As we have developed the theory of a linked porphyry epithermal system at Thor, we've reviewed mountains of historical exploration data, and the pieces are finally falling into place. More than ever, we find Thor has what it takes to become a producing mine with excellent tonnage, potential of both high and low grades. We know that the company is highly undervalued, even against the 2013 43-101 resource estimate. Our shareholders will be rewarded in the long run for their patience with this highly unique, marvelously complex, and nascent linked porphyry epithermal project, which is just brimming with potential. Thank you for watching.